Good afternoon, and welcome to Brunch and Budget on Bonfire Radio with your host, Pamela Capallet, a certified financial planner here to help take the bite out of your budget. Brunchandbudget.com. I'm your sound provider, Dialect, and here's your host, Pamela Capallet.
Thank you, Dialect, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. weekend.
Reverend Dr.
Martin Luther King. As soon as I said it, I was like, I forgot that part. Dialect's going to call me out.
Well, come on. He's got some.
He's got some stuff.
Every time I talk about your name, this is not just on the radio show, but every time in life when I mention your name, I say
you do.
CFP.
You're right.
You know, even at home, I don't know if everyone knows that
address me as
that we're married.
CFP.
I'm like, Pamela Capallet, CFP. Can you come down and stuff from the fridge? No, it's not. That's not true. I don't do it all the time. But I'm saying, it's a part that people sleep on the most, that he was a reverend and a doctor. Those are both difficult things.
So true.
And did it by 25.
Right?
What?
Right?
Yeah.
What did you do by 25?
He graduated high school by 16. It was in, and maybe even college.
He was a genius. He was literally genius. So we are here with Dedrick Asante-Muhammad. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry you started speaking and
no
one knew where his voice
please.
was coming from.
It was just the voice of God. He was like, no.
It was King coming back.
Yeah,
I
there
did
you
it
go.
by 25.
Actually,
I was a very talented student.
Yeah. Oh man. So yes, thank you for being here.
No, it's great.
And it is quite the weekend for this. So Dedrick Asante-Muhammad is the director of the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative at the CFED, the Corporation for Enterprise Development. And if you haven't listened to the 4-part series on the racial wealth gap, go back to it. We got to go to the Racial Wealth Gap Conference, the CFED conference, back in October?
It's the only
September?
conference.
It's the only conference
really
that matters.
It's the only conference that exists.
Officially called the Asset Learning
Yes, the
Conference.
Assets Learning Conference.
And I think it is the largest asset development conference that happens in the country. It's a biannual conference.
I mean, it's got to be. It's so comprehensive.
Yeah.
People from not people from all walks of life, people from every needed walk of life.
Mm-hmm.
I
Was
mean,
there
the
and
circle
real.
was complete. It was
Yes.
crazy.
No, it was my first time on staff as part of it, and it is impressive how they do it. And I guess that's why they do it every 2 years to make sure they have time to plan and build and get people out there.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah,
a
I
year of
love
the
it.
conference, I'll skip every other year.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
right. That's absolutely.
So this is perfect. You already built
so we
that
can skip
in.
it for you.
That's wow.
I love it. I love it. Thinking ahead. So we have Dedrick here, and we gave you a lot of information about the racial wealth gap. The racial wealth gap is real. If you don't believe it, go back and re-listen to those episodes.
We didn't make it up. They didn't make it up. They didn't start it.
Yeah.
We didn't start it, just in case. I mean, you sound like odd things to need to be saying, but you know.
Yeah, but you identified it, and I think that is one of the most critical things. So today we're going to talk about how listeners can take action after learning facts about the racial wealth divide. But before that, we're going to do a little poor tax.
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 Poor tax. So, today's we got this.
They do that live. It is not taped. I'm always impressed that they do it. That they haven't taped it and do a loop. They just do it live every time.
No bumpers every time. It's fresh and brand new.
That's right.
Now, and we've got to do that because we got to keep our spirits up. Because it's fun singing about cool jerks, but it's not so fun telling you. Well, I guess it's
the economic exploitation of poor people.
Yeah,
you need to get yourself up for that.
You're like, okay, let's go.
It's such a crazy thing. I mean, we've in general the reason why we have the poor tax is we've got it backwards. Whenever people see somebody who's poor. Even just anecdotally, different walks of life, different ethnic backgrounds, we all are like, oh, you must have done something to deserve that. It's a brain thing. The brain thinks of the status quo as the normal, and if anyone is doing something outside of the status quo, it is safer for the brain's total chemistry to just decide that they did something wrong rather than the system and society is wrong. So if you ever find yourself in that kind of situation where you're like, whoa, why did I just defend that crooked system that I don't actually like?
Right.
It's not entirely your fault. Your brain, as usual, is trying to play you.
Well, and it's the propaganda of the system you live in is constantly telling you that you get, if you're successful, you deserved it. If you're not, then if you're not successful, then you also deserve that, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
As black, brown, indigenous people know, if you're living in this country, that has to mean you don't like yourself because your people aren't doing that well as a whole, and we know it's beyond that. And again, getting to your point, I mean, again, it is just so expensive to be poor, and I realize I'm not much more much better disciplined financially or what have you. I just have more money. I can make more mistakes.
Right.
When I was
It won't
poor and I
crush
made
you.
a mistake or two, it wiped me out for the week or 2 weeks. So that
And
was
like
more
you
stressful.
said, everyone, people around you, even you, are taught that you deserve it.
That's right.
So then, the self-hate comes in
Yeah.
really strong when you're poor because everyone is telling you, oh, no, you're supposed to be here. This is your fault.
Yeah.
So today's Vortex
Yes.
is we're talking about prepaid cards. Prepaid cards, you might get them from your aunt every Christmas or birthday.
We've seen them now. All these gift cards with the Visa logo. It's not even a store anymore. They're just like American Express is like, here, put money on this card. Spend it anywhere.
I mean, it's really funny because if you know like the history of credit cards started out as basically gift cards for one store before the Visa Corporation. Well, Visa is a combination of a bunch of different companies, a bunch of stores getting together to do their thing.
Whoa.
You
So
can tell-
prepaid cards.
Yeah, we can tell we've done a show about that too.
Right? I know, right?
But the thing with prepaid cards are, it's supposed to be a solution for being unbanked, where if you don't have a bank and you can't deposit your paycheck, we have this account. It's not an account. It's really just a card that has your money. And it sounds like a great thing. It's right. I don't got a bank.
Right.
I can,
Walmart's doing it they're offering it as an option for employees now, where instead of getting a paycheck, you can load it on a prepaid card.
Yeah, a number of people are exploring this option. One thing that you've always got to worry about, especially when I'm talking about a poor tax, is when Walmart gets into something.
Right. You're like, okay, hold on, something's wrong.
Yeah.
The problem with prepaid cards is they're very easy to exploit. One thing, to give you guys a tip, if you get that $25, $50, whatever card in the mail, is immediately put it, where is it? Into
I just usually buy an Amazon gift card.
yeah, she
with
usually gets
that
an
card.
Amazon gift card. I don't actually know if there are other gift cards that don't do this, but the reasoning is because the prepaid cards take a fee out every time you make a purchase.
Every time you swipe, and if you pull cash out, they take a really big fee out. So if you're getting paid, through a prepaid card, then you shouldn't take cash out of it.
Right, which that doesn't sound like the great thing, and that
Right.
doesn't sound like it's a good
you get
option
charged
to
a couple
save.
bucks. Yeah.
And if you're getting charged every time you make a purchase, you want to limit your purchases to simple big purchase. That's like not really having control over your money. And the thing I think is the most egregious is the way that the prepaid cards are making lots of money from people from the balances.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that annoys me
From
the
the
most.
leftover balance?
Yeah,
Yeah.
leftover balances, because
Yeah.
for the most part, you get $25 card or you get your $500 paycheck card. Things aren't neat.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a little spillage and a little overage, and the little $1.37,
Yeah.
$3
just
or whatever
lost.
is lost to you, and man, they get to scrape up all of that money.
Or sometimes the whole $25, because a lot of times
Right.
people put the gift card
Away.
away
Yep.
and then they don't get to it. It's like, oh, I got a prepaid card for this store. I'm going to go to this store next month.
Right.
But then you forget next month. It's
Yeah.
different than having the cash in hand where you can use it for whatever you want.
Exactly. And that's the thing we often talk about is, liquidity. Have that thing available to you, quickly available, so you
Yes.
can get it and move it.
So are you saying everyone should have a bank account?
No, well, you see, that's what I was going to say is,
Oh.
you can talk to banks, and banks will be all up your behind, even more than me, about how prepaid cards are not good for you because they're predatory. But, I mean...
Well, and again, I think it's like anything. It's like it's not a prepaid card. The concept is bad. It's
Right.
what are the conditions of that card? Like,
Exactly.
are there charges every
Right.
time you want to take some money out of that? The gift card piece, I think, and even gift card's a little different than prepaid card because some people use prepaid card to pay people because they don't have they don't have the finances for a credit card. Or
Right.
Exactly.
And so in some ways that could be good, but again, you can be exploitive with a prepaid card. You can be exploitive with a bank account. You can be exploitive through check cashing. But it's, where can you get low fees, not predatory how can we avoid predatory lending through any means?
Right.
Whether it's
Right.
prepaid, whether it's check cashing, whether
Banks,
it's,
everywhere.
Well,
Everywhere's trying to get
all
there's
your
a
of
money.
loan shark down the street, whatever.
Right.
Just how do you avoid that?
You're right, though, because all of the fees that are associated with prepaid cards, at least in terms of the amounts, are something that I've experienced with a bank. Even when I was younger, I went to a check cashing place instead of a bank because I didn't like the fees and the way they were treating me, and
Yep.
needed to figure out what I was doing with my paycheck in the meantime. So I hear that.
Yeah.
And which is why I think, again, and the importance of your show is for every mechanism, we need to look at, and it takes time and energy, and it's hard for people, but what are the fees? What are the conditions of the product I'm using, right? Whether it's a prepaid card, banks, can be exploitive, but a lot of banks also do have particular types of accounts that are designed for lower, moderate income people that have a lot less fees, but you need to do and again, it's a pain. You need to, and the poorer you are, the more important the due diligence is.
Yep.
Because if you're making good money, it doesn't hurt as much if a few dollars are taken here or there, because it's not that big a percentage of your income. But when you're a lower income or lower wealth, you need that every dollar, every cent, and you need to examine much more how this product is treating you, and not just get caught that prepaid cards work or check cashing works or this works, but how does this particular product work? Because it varies. As
usual, time is not money, but if you do not have the money, you are going to have to spend time.
Yeah.
That's the poor tax.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's the poor tax. Poor tax, yay!
I think you're getting the wrong message from the
Yay,
song.
poor tax. More poor taxes.
I thought you said more tax.
Oh, no.
But even then, that would just be also taxing the children of African people, because they would spell it wrong.
Oh, geez.
Like a more tax, really?
No, too many puns.
Yeah, I didn't get the Moorish part until the very end. So now I get it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's what they always say.
Exactly. Oh my God. So Dedrick, you're here. We definitely want to use your expertise. Can you remind everybody what the racial wealth gap is? We've talked about it a lot, but in case this is your first time even hearing that phrase, start putting it into your vernacular, because it is real.
Sure. And actually, back in 2004 or 5, I got in a big debate about whether I was to call this, people were using the phrase racial wealth gap, and I use the phrase racial wealth divide, and I just hold on to that just because I think it better describes that it's not just a gap like, oh, how did that get
We'll
there?
go fill it
like,
in.
How did
Like,
this
whoops.
gap occur? Yeah, it's a divide, meaning that there's massive wealth inequality between African Americans and whites, Latinos and whites, Native Americans and whites, some Asian American populations and whites. And it came through a history of racial inequality, white supremacy. And a lot of people, oftentimes we talk about economic inequality, they look at income inequality, and generally African Americans, Latinos make 60, 65 cents on every dollar that whites make. But in terms of wealth, African Americans, Latinos have 10% or less of the wealth that whites make. So they have 10 cents, 7 cents on every dollar of wealth.
So if a white person has $100,000, a black person or a Latino person has $10,000.
That's right. I mean, the median wealth now is usually around 110, 111, something like that for whites. And for blacks and Latinos, it's like 7,000 and 6,000 in terms of wealth. And it's not just a disparity.
Median wealth.
Median wealth, right? Yeah, that's right. That's not for
just,
poor people.
That's just the line in the middle.
In the middle, right? And what does that mean? When you only have 7,000, 6,000 in wealth. It means that if you, and blacks and Latinos are much more likely to experience unemployment, longer waves of employment, you have very little to fall back on. Like how long can $6,000 keep you going, like without income? Or you have much less money if there's an opportunity to send a kid to college. Your whole savings is $6,000, $7,000. So what can you do to help that person? Or if you wanted to start a small business. So it really has, to me, I think wealth is the foundation of economic inequality, and economic inequality is the foundation of racial inequality in this country. So that's why I'm always pushing racial wealth divide.
Wealth is the foundation of economic inequality, and economic inequality is the foundation of racial inequality. I just need to echo you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else, you can just rewind that and listen to him say it again, but I needed that for my own spirit, just letting you know.
Ooh.
And I think, and again, we're on this King weekend, and I think that was a space that King and the civil rights movement was going. I mean, people before King understood that too, but I think King, as he was working through the segregation laws, which we talk about. Because, again, I think we celebrate civil rights history. We like to celebrate the victories, but we don't celebrate the defeats. And the defeats was that the economic empowerment that King was talking about, the Poor People's Campaign, the Freedom Budget of 1967, all of that aspect was not enacted.
Well, we don't learn that in school.
No.
Not at all. I didn't even know until I listened to one of your interviews previously about King that he pushed economic inequality as the critical key to racial equality.
That's right.
Yo, they don't shoot rabble rousers. Van Jones is fine Colbert and them are fine until they actually start doing something that's dangerous.
No, and it's amazing too. Even the way we've looked back in history about the civil rights movement, like it was victorious, without people who lived through it, like my mother, my father. They felt they lost. I mean, King was killed.
Yeah.
The Black Panther Party was
the
put
government.
down, right?
Yeah.
The SNCC was greatly weakened. You know, a lot of these organizations were pushed down in the press. They didn't feel like they came into victory. But we then rewrite it later as victory, which is why I always focus on 1963 March on Washington, I Have a Dream speech, versus 1967-68, where King's being attacked by the NAACP, by the federal government for being unpatriotic and not being willing to go along with the program enough. You know,
Wow.
so and then if you don't understand that, that's so important. Then you don't understand why we still have such great racial inequality today, because you think we won in 60-something.
Well, that's what they tell you.
That's
and
right.
so everybody learns that in school, and then you think, oh, racism is over.
That's the
right.
game.
That's
and
right.
and then people of color become whiny and entitled because, hey, look, you guys had your Jesuses.
That's right.
You had the civil rights movement.
And people of color believe it then, because then you really believe we won, but I'm not in a good condition, so I'm doing something wrong. Instead of the fact that, no, the struggle that was righteous then is righteous now for greater inequality, for greater equality, and to fight against the forces of inequality, and we never won that. And it's really interesting how it used to be the happy ending was a picture of King, even though King was killed, and it wasn't a happy ending. They then switched it to Obama.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
without
yeah.
saying, "Oh, we were wrong. You didn't win then, but you did win because of Obama was president."
Yeah.
Even though, you know, and that's why again I got into racial economic inequality. It's a good way of just let's look at the material conditions.
Right.
How have they improved? How they haven't. It's
Are
very
people
simple.
living better?
Yes, right.
Or
And
not? The end.
And if the inequality and if people aren't living better, then no, we didn't get what we needed. And that is where you start looking at racial inequality as an issue that we have, and that's where we put out reports like the Ever Growing Gap report,
Yeah.
where it's highlighting that actually in the next 40 years, it looks like that wealth inequality is just on the path to growing. So it's not even, because a common narrative is, well, maybe we didn't, we're not doing as fast, we're not going as fast as we can toward progress, but we're getting there.
Right.
But the report's highlighting, no, we're not getting there. We're getting to greater and greater racial economic inequality.
The
actually
divide is
countries-
getting bigger.
The divide, the racial wealth divide,
Yeah.
racial economic divide is getting bigger. And so we're actually going in the wrong direction, which means we need much more radical change. But that's a large frame thing about racial wealth inequality.
No, that was great and really helpful. I think one of the issues that we have is that socially things are constantly and consistently improving throughout the world. That's always going to be a thing. That's just kind of how evolution
It's progress,
works.
you know?
Yeah, yes.
And we're always pushing to, like, be better. But who's getting left behind, and why are they getting left behind?
And what systems are we accepting as status quo that are deleterious towards us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got to roll to a song, and then after this, we'll talk. I want to hear more about where Dedrick came from.
Interesting.
All right, yeah, we're going to get some background.
How did you get to be the director of the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative? Because that is the freaking coolest job title ever.
I'm sure it was like those movies with white actors where they just show up at a place and they get a job, and then 6 months later they're like, yo, I had no idea what this was. But they're like, we love you now, right? It was just like one of those.
So I never
All
would have
right,
guessed
story
I would have
over.
got here.
Don't
but yeah.
tell Master the babysitter's dead. And we're gonna go to songs songs about and influenced by Dr. King. First one called Martin Luther Kinged Me by Divine Karama, an MC, educator, activist, artivist out in Lexington, Kentucky. And we'll see you in a minute. Bunch of Budget, Bonfire Radio.
The meaning of nonviolence. And I think there is a contagious quality in a movement like this when everybody talks about nonviolence and being faithful to it and being dignified in your resistance. It tends to get over to the larger group because it becomes a part of the vocabulary, the mover.
Great rhymes is like a perfect mate find in this millennium. Break up the makeup through FaceTime is ridiculous. I can't escape this dime. She can play the vibe of feminine. Praise divine is faith through the space-time continuum. Replace brush with a mic, Picasso with the poem. Passing off gems like Stockton and Malone. Locked in, writing bars for youth on the daily. On the mic, bring truth, preserve Martin Luther's legacy. So-called rappers are magicians with the iPhone. We're rapping about nothing lacks substance on the microphone. You can stand as a king, save a soul with it. I lay down like a nigga, dig a hole in it. Hold for a coffin, many souls for sale. No tricks, just knowledge overload for Dale. I confuse the archdiocese, it's cold in hell. Shining like the blind scholars, but my flow is braille. It's like blood of a slave, but the heart of a king free. Sitting on my throne while my Nubian queen sing. Malcolm X's spot while Martin Luther King me. You gotta understand the way God designed my soul. Then you overstand the elements to make divine flow. Daughter needed clothes, broke dimes from O's. And mama raised me better than that, so a 9 to 5 I go. Plus I saw my homie catch the 38s in the dome. So rappers always talk about tricked in the dough. It's hard for me to feel you when it's 20 below. And I'm walking by the homeless outside with no coat. Martin didn't die for us to stump with no conscience. Ignoring brothers suffering like we a bunch of monsters. Martin didn't die for our kids to kill kids. Martin Luther died so we could survive Willie Lynch. Arguing whether he's a myth or not. It's actually the stars and the glitz of the doctrine. Right. So why y'all brains is stuck in the irony? I got a shotgun ready to hunt a Duck Dynasty.
Never with my eyes saw the mistreatment of any black person. Talking about back during the Jim Crow days. Not once. Where we lived, it was all farmers. The blacks worked for the farmers. I hoed cotton with them. I'm with the blacks because we're white trash. We're going across the field. They're singing and happy. I never heard one of them, one black person say, I'll tell you what, these doggone white people, not a word. Pre-entitlement, pre-welfare, you say, were they happy? They were godly. They were happy. No one was singing the blues.
And we're back. Bunch of Budget, Bonfire Radio. That was Martin Luther King'd Me by Divine Karama. I dig it. I like the way you say King Me. People like talking about they like playing chess. I don't like chess. One, I'm not into war. Two, I ain't got the patience. So I'm going to just play some checkers, and then you can king me, and that's going to be all right. Come on. You have to act instinctively. It's like sports. Chess is like football. That's why I'm more of a basketball than a football fan, because I like my sports to have you running.
I like more like mixed martial arts. So what is that?
Oh, you just like punch you in the face, cat.
You're
the guy who like half an hour into the Monopoly game, you're like, get this. Kick the thing
just
in half.
rolling over, exactly.
Yeah, that's how I like to play Monopoly, actually.
At the end, just overthrow
Not
the
into
system.
that game. But yeah, we are here with Dedrick Asante-Muhammad, the director of the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative,
who is
CFPD.
putting jujitsu moves on the racial wealth divide.
For real.
And I gotta sharpen my skills.
Woo!
With a rear naked choke on racism.
Oh my God.
A Kimura or something.
This got so violent, you guys. Ugh.
It's funny. I feel like a lot of people would be more into or feel like they could participate if we had more violent words, like, because people love like kick cancer's butt type of things like that. But when we discuss these things, and again talking about the CFED conference, man, if I had no background in dealing with the economic issues or dealing with people of color, and I just walked in not knowing this, I wouldn't know what to do. I think I'd be like paralyzed with fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
it's true.
I think it is a challenge because I think, and so some people want to not talk about how structural and how deep the problems are because they're worried about depressing people. But then I find the negative about that is that when people do a simple 2 or 3 step solution on how to strengthen yourself economically and it doesn't really work out well, they feel like, again, it's them instead of that.
Right.
No, you're doing a 2 or 3 step piece to help yourself in an economy that's completely going in the wrong direction. And so you're going to be fighting a lot of a wind in trying to do that.
Right, and it's so discouraging.
Yeah.
And so many people are against you, and it's hard to remember that and not be discouraged by it. But then I've seen people actually, the failure of like missing something or not saving the money that they said they were going to save or what they told themselves. It was very much like, I blame myself. I just wasn't disciplined enough. I didn't have the willpower, when really there were so many other factors contributing to the fact that you couldn't do it.
So I try to do a mix of highlighting the structural issues, how massive the problem is, and then setting up, all right, now what's the best things you can do in this larger context? And it's hard to kind of a mixture of empowerment versus recognition that we're on the path for centuries more of massive racial wealth inequality.
Woo. And I think the biggest thing too is just like, it's important to be aware of what to watch out for.
I think the biggest thing is that he just said the word centuries.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's like more than a lifetime.
If
mostly.
y'all haven't seen the stat, you could just Google it. It would take black families 228 years to amass the same amount of wealth that white families have today.
Today.
That's right.
Today.
So that would mean it would take them 228 years and a time machine because they'd have to come back to today.
Yes.
That's right. Or white wealth that has to completely freeze.
Yes.
And not make any more money for 200, not for a year, for 228 years.
So just chill out,
and
white
then
folks.
blacks would
Y'all are
would
doing all
catch
right.
up. But and again, I think that's the type of equity we don't want. We don't want the type of equity where whites get to be as poor as blacks.
Right.
Then
we're all
trying
fucked.
to strengthen financial stability for everyone.
Which is another funny thing about, I mean, this is about people's lack of understanding of economics in general. There is often a sentiment that, well, you know, if the black people start taking over and getting all the jobs and getting all the money, what is this going to do for for my community's economy and the overall economy? This is going to be bad,
Which
right?
is, I mean, the zero-sum mentality in general is what screws people.
Yeah.
You're
Life
like,
is a
oh,
cipher, not a
if you get a
triangle."
dollar, I don't get a dollar. That dollar that you got, you took it from me. And that is not how the economy works.
Well, I'm trying to highlight in the ever-growing gap again that if we keep going in this direction, and in 2043, the country's predominantly people of color, majority people of color, and you have such a high level of Latinos in the population, blacks in the population. If blacks and black and Latino median wealth is going down, right? There's some estimates that I think black wealth by 2043 could be like, I don't know, $400 median wealth, and Latino would be $1,000.
Wait.
Is that going down relative to inflation or just going down?
That's going down, keeping inflation,
So it's-
factoring in inflation.
Oh, factoring in. Okay, so it is factoring in inflation, not necessarily. Not it's just like careening downward.
Yeah, but so those are the estimates of things keep going the way they've been going, and you can't have a strong middle class economy if 40% of the population has wealth less than $1,000, right? And so it's not, and so you need people of color, and that's what I try to go over the history. The American middle class, which is the American white middle class, was created in the 40s, 30s through 50s, and massive investments was created for that. We haven't had that type of investment in black population, in the growing Latino population, even growing Asian American population. There's going to need to be more investments on that. We have to recreate an American middle class economy. If we don't do that because of racial resentment, then we'll just clearly have an economy more and more so of growing economic inequality where there's where the middle class is being wiped out slowly but surely.
You know those countries that you people listening, you know those countries that you think of as countries with money, but in your heart it's really only 8 or 9
people
dudes who have
all the money.
Like China.
Yeah,
Like people are like, oh,
straight up.
China's got
And
all
Russia.
the power and all the money. Yeah, and Russia's got all this power and all this money. But your average Chinese person and Russian person is cold and poor.
Yeah, it's a third world
that's right.
country.
No,
Well, and I want to go back to what you said too about the fact that the American dream was government subsidized. It wasn't a bunch of people suddenly pulling themselves up from their bootstraps and saying, we're going to do this now. Individualism is the way to go. It's the government saying, oh no, we literally have to create a middle class.
Yeah.
And to have that narrative pass through these generations and now have people think like, oh, well, you just didn't do it right or you didn't work hard enough. It's not the actual thing that happened. It's just the narrative we were told.
Did you just
absolutely.
call libertarians the entitled third child?
They are.
I heard even getting before the New Deal, policies or what have you. I heard someone say this stat that I think it was 1 out of 4, 1 out of 6 white people can trace in their families getting land from the Homestead Act
Wow.
of the 1800s of when the government, not just individuals, cleared Native Americans out of land and then said now it's government land and now we're going to give it to white people. And so, again, yes, we need to, and actually, I get this conversation all the time. People say, well, how can we financially empower African American, Latino communities, and what financial education curriculum is going to do it? And I'm like, that's not how the white middle class was created.
No.
Like, you didn't give everybody in 1940 a financial education curriculum, and then they just blew up in the middle class.
Right.
It had massive societal investments into housing, into home ownership, into education, into jobs, because that's really what
Job
World War II
creation,
did.
yep.
Was massive federal investment in a military, created a manufacturing sector, which then allowed for mass hiring and created the infrastructure for a private manufacture, right?
Yeah.
So it was really mass investment in government investment, and it was a mass subsidy to private corporations, which allowed for a booming economy. So, again, those are all macro big issues, but that is the reality of where we are, and that is why If we want the system to work for us, we have a system that's focused in on actually investing in the American people. And for the first time, make America great again, make America great for the first time with everyone, and that's what we're still fighting for. And that's what King died fighting for and never got, and we still need to be fighting for it today.
Please, today, if you do have any love for or want to celebrate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, please pay attention to his platform of economic development. Please pay attention to the fact that
find those speeches.
They killed the brother not because he was saying stuff that black folk was liking to listening to, because there's a lot of folks who say they never shot Richard Pryor. Although it's interesting that he got his disease shortly after he got a similar awakening. But as soon as Dr. King is telling the people in the jailhouse, oh, you white people jailing me, how much money you make? Oh, you need to be marching with me. As soon as he started convincing those folks, just like as soon as Detroit Red found himself a last name and a perspective, that's when they...
Which would have been Malcolm X, for those who don't know who Detroit Red is. Just to make sure.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting the reference.
Detroit Red, Malcolm X, El Haj Malik Shabazz. If you, in the same way that if you care about the things that he did and the person that he finished his life as, you call him El Haj Malik Shabazz. The same thing with Dr. King. Pay attention to the economic stuff, which has always been the most important platform.
And if you want a full book, get one of his last books, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community.
Oh, heck yeah.
It's a great one. And then, too, if you want a whole book, just Google Freedom Budget, 1967. And that was the economic agenda that King signed on to, NAACP signed on to, Stokely Carmichael signed on to, about what was needed in 1967 to create an economy going toward racial equity. And we need a lot of those same things.
Yeah, I feel like you can get a PDF of those like anywhere.
If you Google Freedom Budget 1967, the group PRRAC has a PDF. That'll be the first thing that comes up of the entire Freedom Budget 1967.
We'll add that to the show notes.
Yes.
So how did you get to be the director of the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative? What is your background? Why are you passionate about this? Why is this your life's work?
Yeah, I mean, my degree is in political science. My undergraduate, my master's was in religion. But what was really driving me was always looking at these issues of racial economic inequality. My mother is a white woman from the South. My father is a black man from the South. And my mother was, as for a white person, decided to be involved in the civil rights movement and was very engaged. Was at the last meeting where whites were allowed for the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Got a chance to meet and work a little bit with Stokely Carmichael, what have you.
Wow.
So she always raised me on King. She raised me on King. Some of the first books I was reading was about King. I'd read 90% of King's works by 13, so that was just always a big thing for me. And my father was more so, as a black person, you had to be somewhat involved in the civil rights movement.
Right.
Right.
At that time,
again, like he wasn't a leading activist, but he was. He grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, so some of his friends were part of the Little Rock Nine, those who helped integrate the schools in Arkansas. So I was just raised about this as a kid, wanted to get more involved, had many different jobs, multiculturalism. I was working at a maximum security prison for women, looking at ways to help the disproportionate incarceration rates of of the victims of those who've been incarcerated, and was greatly enjoying that. And actually got into a demonstration against. A lot of people think the police brutality thing is a newer thing, right? But clearly, you can go back to the Black Panther Party. You can go back to everything.
Yeah.
But in the early 2000s, that was a huge issue. Reverend Sharpton was doing a lot of leadership on that.
Yeah. Yep.
I was in some demonstrations there, and an officer put his hand on my sister, and I helped the officer get off my sister, and then a bunch of officers jumped on me, and I ended up in jail. And went to Reverend Sharpton. I was living in New York and started talking to him about this case, and then he hired me. So that was then my first opportunity to actually do more structured work on a larger scale around civil rights, racial justice, what have you. And I was amazed at how much Sharpton was doing around economics on the margins. And I was like, oh, and I started remembering some of the stuff I'd read about King and realized that, once again, I need to focus back. And not just King, Stokely Carmichael, the Black Power analysis was all about institutional racism versus individual racism and the economics behind that. And so
if you only know new stuff, by the way, Stokely is also known as Kwame Ture.
That's true. That's right. Absolutely. And so it made me refocus in on that. I had the opportunity. I saw a job description as I was looking for a new job. At United for a Fair Economy, organization that was doing great work on popular education about how economics really works and how it doesn't work for the average person. And they were hiring the first racial wealth divide coordinator. And because of my experience with Sharpton and other work. They hired me, and I've been doing that professionally ever since. For about 13 years now, United for a Fair Economy, to a think tank, Institute for Policy Studies, again focusing on racial economic inequality, to directing the NAACP economic department for the country, and now over at CFPD starting the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative. And just I think this will be my career, I'm assuming now, because sadly, I don't think I'm going to solve it in the next few years. So I think this will be a life's work.
This is why I think you're the right person for the job. Thank you for saying that honest reality.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. It won't happen in our lifetimes. It might
won't.
not happen in our grandkids'
It's
lifetimes.
not going to happen with some random policy change that maybe get overturned in 4 years. And all of this stuff is always up for grabs and always on the table.
Well,
and
you
that's
talked
why the work is constant.
You talked about there being hundreds of years from now if we did everything right, starting right now. And we shouldn't expect everyone to do everything right. And in general, those of you out there trying to do the thing that you think is the good thing, remember, if it really is the good thing, you're not going to live to see it. And that is what it is. And like we were talking about earlier about, people failing economically and failing in ways and blaming themselves is because we're not taught enough to trust the process.
Yeah.
Well, trust the process.
Trust in the process of what you're doing.
Of transformation. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's why it is important, and we need to do a better job of talking about racial economic. There's one thing about racial economic inequality, like how we're going to bridge that divide. But I always try to help people understand there's that, and then there's strengthening financial stability. And most of us got to focus on strengthening financial stability. It's like you don't have to focus on, I'm trying to get where white people are. No, first try to focus on how can you improve your condition. And understanding, all of the challenges of being a low-wealth person in this capitalist society where wealth is every year being further concentrated among the wealthiest. You understand that context. Now you might be able to better understand how to move within that context. And that's what we all need to help work with people. That's what I think Brunch and Budget's about.
Yes, entirely.
So practically then, what is financial stability? What does it look like? How do you know when you're financially stable? Because I feel like from what I've seen, everyone feels like they could have more money, or they're not doing enough, or they're not doing it right. So what is that foundation of financial stability where someone can say, all right, now I can move forward from here because I'm in this place where I can take advantage of opportunities and not have such huge setbacks?
Sure. And again, even when you're financially stable, you could always use more money.
Right.
All that means is you're stable, but it doesn't mean you don't want be in a better position 5 years from now, or you want a better situation for your kids. And one thing I just want to highlight again, though, about is with wealth. It's one thing I think for people to start understanding is that wealth doesn't mean you have $1 million, right? Wealth might mean if you have no dollars in a bank account, maybe it's you have $50 saved, $100 saved. It's increasing your kind of emergency savings money to the point where it's not just emergency savings, it then becomes investment money, right? Or it might become savings for not just emergencies, but savings to buy a house or to buy a car or something that will provide a service for you and hopefully will provide a return in the long run, And so that's the idea of, always the first steps of building wealth is utilizing the wealth or assets around you to bring back, greater returns. And if the wealth and assets around you is educational knowledge, is family and friends, or is, utilizing that to help give some type of other return that then can build into. Because you do have to eventually get into financial assets. Some of my touchy-feely friends will say, oh, I'm wealthy with friends, I'm wealthy with love, and that's good.
Yeah.
But you need some financial wealth too,
right?
Because
people
your friends
love
can only
metaphors for your poor behind.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Well, because then you're like,
particularly
well,
when all your
fine
friends,
then.
Yeah, particularly when all your friends are poor,
right?
Right, because then it causes problems along the way. So I just wanted to get a little bit into that around the importance of understanding what wealth is.
Yeah.
Because again, I think progressives too are so scared to talk about wealth. They just talk about maybe, I don't know, like overturning the system. But then the only people talking about wealth are the people who are going to sell you something that's really just going to strip your resources and enrich them. Right.
And I want to highlight the thing that you said. That was also something that was proposed by the 90s rap group Onyx, is that a solid economic system is OPM.
Other people's money.
Yeah.
I mean, well, because on the really real, we were talking about this about record labels earlier and with lots of businesses and just in the Homestead Act, period.
That's right.
Things aren't getting done without OPM. presidents aren't getting elected, businesses aren't getting built, films aren't getting financed,
That's right.
writers and painters aren't getting discovered.
Every
It's just what it
successful
is.
business person uses other people's money, and oftentimes using government money.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all using government resources, right? Like if you drive, you use the government paid for road
Yep.
to get
Straight
you from
up.
A to B. If you had to do that by yourself, you wouldn't have gone anywhere, right?
Right.
Because you couldn't afford to spend years
Yeah.
building a road or what have you. So, and then that helps changes the mindset about it's all about you. I mean, it's about you utilizing the resources around you, and better
Yep.
utilizing whether government programs or private programs. You were asking about financial stability. I went on this tangent about wealth. I mean, the first measure of understanding financial stability is looking at your expenses and looking at your income, and are you at a place where your income is being able to cover your most basic expenses, right? And
Right.
if you're not, that's what you got to focus on without going into debt, right? And so then
Yeah.
that's one level of financial stability.
Right, is making more money than you're spending.
Or making
basically.
at least as much money as you're saving,
Yeah.
as you're spending. It's
Right.
one level. And then
Yeah.
another level is, well, it's not good that if you're getting paid by the hour and I have to call in sick and I don't have enough money for the rent that month,
Yeah.
I need some savings. Right. And so then another level of financial stability is how much savings you have to keep you going through a bad time. And oftentimes people will do anywhere from 3 months to 6 months of savings, liquid savings that you can get onto that you always have around
Of
you.
living expenses.
Of living expenses that'll cover you for those 3 to
Which,
6 months.
if you're listening to that and in your head you're like, holy shit, that's a lot of money. That's a lot. And it is a lot of money. The milestone that you should try to hit first, $1,000, right? Like get to 4 figures. Or
Yep.
get to $400. Get to the average amount of an emergency.
Yeah, I was going to say, start
Yeah.
off with, first, the way I like to think of it is you start off with real money, which is $100. I remember Daddy Lect used to tell me, it's like, nothing counts as real money till you hit $100. He was the Jewish one in his family, not the black one. But you start off with $100,
Yep.
and then you get to that $400, so you can handle that, and then you get to 1,000,
Right.
and then I think the really important marker after those is that, like, if you're going to stick to it or not, is 1 month
1 month.
of living expenses.
So
understanding
$2,000 to
and
$3,000. Yep.
Yep. I mean, again, depending on what your salary is and what have you. But I think that there's just always different marks of financial stability, and that's why it's an ongoing process. And then
Right.
strengthening your financial stability. Once you have, let's say you get to the point where you have your savings, then, well, are you investing? Like, are you able now not just to have enough in case something bad's happening? Do you have money that you can use, extra money, or money that's beyond your expenses and beyond your savings that you can use to actually bring a return?
Yeah.
Right. And then, you start thinking about home ownership and all of these other things. And again, not all of us are going to get to all of these levels. I think my mom, her focus was, I'm going to get these kids through a good public education, get them into college, right? She never was able to focus that much on her retirement. She was never able to own a home on her own. But then the long-term payback is my mom lives with us. And
Right.
that is like, and that is the return on her investment of her kids, and we oftentimes have
I
to
love
do
that.
right?
Yeah. Well, and you were able to do all of those things because of the things that she laid as a foundation.
That's right.
And so this is the kind of thing where it's going to take generations. And I think the
Wealth is long term, just
Wealth
like
is
this idea of
long-term.
economic insecurity. It's long term.
Yes.
It's not next week. It's not next month. You have
Right.
goals next week, next month, but it's
Right.
building up over years, decades, what have you.
Right. It's the difference between being poor and being broke, right? Broke is temporary. Poor is a generational thing. Poor is
Exactly.
like an state
But
of existence.
Broke is that thing. It's like, oh, it can be fun to be broke.
Right, right.
No.
People
Well, and actually,
fantasize about it.
The broke MC. people-
Romanticize
everyone wants
about
to
it.
be the
well, yeah,
broke MC.
I mean,
Yeah.
and again, I've had so many like upper class kids talk about, I was broke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like,
you
were
you were
you?
broke. You didn't have a lot of money to go out, but like your family was fine. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
you could
your
go
parents
home
were
to your
fine.
parents'
you could always
house.
go home. Like you had wealth behind you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the thing is,
Yes,
sometimes
wealth
when
behind
we're
you.
broke, even temporarily, there's no wealth behind us. Like it really is all on us.
Right.
Well, and when it comes to lesson money, or like, because I know people are like, oh, I learned the lesson by being broke. I figure like lesson money is when you have gone to bed hungry because going to bed was the better option, just in life, at any point in life.
And, actually, I want to give you this link to woman, activist I know, Asia, who does a lot of stuff around low-income people.
Asia Monet?
Huh? Asia, that's not her last name.
Poet?
I'm blanking her. No, not the poet. But she wrote an interesting piece about contemporarily what it's like to go to sleep with your kids hungry. You know what I mean? And like dealing with that type of psychological impact.
Wow.
That one you just took it way too deep for me. No. I could go to bed with me hungry. I don't even have
that's
kids.
Right. That's
right.
I
just you just said that, and like my soul just welled up with tears.
That's right. I mean, it's that whole next thing. It's one thing when you're 20-something,
right?
And okay, you know, I've skipped this meal, but it's another thing when your kids are saying, "I'm hungry." And you're tickling them to try to help them forget the fact that they're hungry, right? And she's writing about that contemporarily. So, you know, looking at those real spaces where people are, and then what does it mean? What does financial stability mean for her? You know, and it means food security first for the kids, right? So you always got to understand your context and then look at, you know, the next steps forward. And again, just with the racial wealth divide, this is why it's also important, because it's not just we're individually poor. Our families don't have wealth. Our whole communities don't have wealth. So even when we're individually successful, you know, we're helping our cousin.
Yeah.
Which means we don't have as much money to save. Or we don't have as much money for a down payment for a home, or these types of things. And that's why the racial impact keeps going, because you need to have a mass investment into the entire community to really help even individuals really succeed, unless they get a ridiculous like tens of millions of dollars, and then maybe you can break through that wall. But most of us who will be lucky to ever even see near a six-figure, $100,000 salary, that's not enough to pull your whole family out or your community.
Well, don't sleep on how much just six figures how quickly six figures can disappear.
Oh no, absolutely.
We think about Hammer.
Family.
You know, everyone loves. We really need to do a whole episode where we talked about like the economics of what Hammer did, because I mean, people look at MC Hammer like, oh, he blew everything on. No, he got a bunch of jobs. He gave a bunch of jobs to his peoples in his community, and maintaining more than one person's salary for an entire year is crazy.
That's $1 million. Yeah.
Muhammad Ali was the same. You know, like he had to rebuild his wealth because he was helping a whole bunch of asset poor and also giving money to organizations to help people. It takes a lot.
Yeah. And even just like what you just described is what you've talked about before, is the difference between having an income gap and having a wealth gap, right? And two people can make six figures. Two people can make $100,000, make the exact same amount of money. And one of them is saving up enough money for a down payment on a home. And the other one is paying their mom's rent, or they have two kids to feed, or their cousin is, you know, they're borrowing money, or their cousin's borrowing money from them, or something like that.
That's right. Or having to do the down payment themselves, meaning they don't have as big of a down payment, so they actually have to pay. Like you said, we started earlier, it's expensive to be poor.
It is.
So you're going to pay more for your home because you're going to have a higher interest rate because you don't have as much wealth behind you. You don't have as much as a down payment. So it's like, again, it's the poor tax for Black and Latino high-income people.
Yeah.
It's still, it's a, you know, it's a poor tax, it's a poor wealth tax. You know, it's a racial tax, right?
Yeah.
And
then
that's really what I call it.
Yeah, there's the wealth divide, and there's the income divide.
Yeah.
And there's the unemployment divide. And there's the incarceration, where you're getting all of these things where you're more likely to suffer from. So all of that, you know, accumulates.
Oh my God! Let's go to a song. Jeez.
So, I'm gonna say some positive stuff right here. So again, today we're celebrating.
The truth is
Dr.
positive.
King.
It might be a little depressing. I think we were positive before, but go ahead.
My favorite thing
Better
about reality is the truth will set you free, but first it'll put you through a ringer and make you miserable. And one thing I want to shout out and highlight. Maybe we should make a playlist out of this for folks to listen to. You have no idea how many punk rock songs from countries that are not the U.S. are about Dr. King, from people of all backgrounds.
Wow.
And I'm really proud and happy to see how influential and inspirational his spirit can be. And I'm going to play a song from Toulouse, France, by an MC named Sense, Rap Sense. And it's called Martin Luther King Boulevard, which I'm sure even in France is a bad neighborhood.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
We'll check you in a minute. Brunch or Budget, Bonfire Radio.
Tous métis, tous bâtards, on a tous dans les gènes un peu de parfum de hasard, citoyen d'ailleurs, ni couleur ni nationalité, tous étrangers quand on sent qu'on n'est pas aimé.
Deux enfants s'amusent à se battre dans cette rue, l'un d'eux porte une cagoule blanche au sommet pointu, l'autre à la peau sombre, faisant le mort s'étend sur le trottoir, juste des gosses qui jouent sur Martin Luther King Boulevard, s'échangeant le masque, marqué des chevaliers en lettres d'or, les deux amis, les deux frères de sang, replantent le décor, se racontant des histoires de gospel et de croix enflammées, des mots d'adultes qui dans leur bouche semblent s'être égarés, provenant d'une fenêtre, une détonation retentit, le noir se jeta au sol, le blanc tomba près de lui, sans vie, le blanc et le noir, frères ennemis, depuis la nuit des temps, une lutte qui les unit qu'en une seule couleur, le rouge sang.
Tous métis, tous bâtards, on a tous dans les gènes un peu de parfum de hasard, citoyen d'ailleurs, ni couleur ni nationalité, tous étrangers quand on sent qu'on n'est pas aimé.
2h30 du matin, sur Martin Luther King Boulevard, un homme rentre chez lui, retrouver sa famille comme chaque soir. 3 hommes dans une camionnette s'arrêtent à sa hauteur. Le bat à mort, James Bird, pour eux n'était pas de bonne couleur. L'enchaîne par les chevilles avec un câble au pare-choc GMC. Souvenir de champs de coton et de bâtons négriers. Le destin a voulu symboliquement que ce soit dans cette rue qu'un être humain ferme ses yeux bien plus tôt que prévu. Il n'y aura pas qu'une silhouette blanche à la craie sur la chaussée, mais des cercles rouges le long de la rue où il fut traîné. Un martyr pour sa couleur comme ses ancêtres l'ont été. N'a qu'au cimetière réservé aux noirs que James reposa en paix.
Tous métis, tous bâtards, on a tous dans les gènes un peu de parfum de hasard, citoyen d'ailleurs, ni couleur ni nationalité, tous étrangers quand on sent qu'on n'est pas aimé.
À la place de cahiers, des flaques de sang sur le bureau, des impacts de balles à la place de dessins au tableau, un fratricide des enfants mutilant notre enfant innocent, prétexte le racisme pour expliquer ce geste inconscient, perdre tout repère, toute notion de bien ou de mal, au point d'exécuter des êtres humains et trouver ça banal, éduqués dans la peur de l'autre, endoctrinés ou ignorés des futurs meurtriers qui ne demandaient qu'à être aimés. Ils ont servi d'armes à des adultes qui n'avaient pas le courage d'assumer leurs idées et qui se contentent que de dressage, des gamins qui au lycée ont oublié leur cours d'histoire. Le sang s'est encore répandu sur Martin Luther King Boulevard.
Tous métis, tous bâtards, on a tous dans les gènes un peu de parfum de hasard, citoyen d'ailleurs, ni couleur ni nationalité, tous étrangers quand on sent qu'on n'est pas aimé. Tous métis, tous bâtards, on a tous dans les gènes un peu de parfum de hasard, citoyen d'ailleurs, ni couleur ni nationalité, tous étrangers quand on sent qu'on n'est pas aimé.
La couleur ébène de Megan Williams, on faisait une damnée, comment a-t-elle pu supporter, comment ne pas vouloir se venger, comment ne pas préférer mourir que s'en rappeler, comment ne pas devenir fou, comment pardonner. Quelle haine, quelle colère, quelle ignorance, quelle éducation, quelle perversion, quelle cruauté, quelle croyance. Qu'est-ce qui pousse à de tels actes de démence? J'ai mal, j'ai honte de l'humain et de sa décadence. Comment peut-on faire ça? Comment soi-disant l'être humain est capable de ces choses-là? Petite sœur, ferme les yeux, je vais te raconter une histoire, celle de l'horreur qui est humaine sur Martin Luther King Boulevard.
Tous métis, tous bâtards, on a tous dans les gènes un peu de parfum de hasard, citoyen d'ailleurs, ni couleur ni nationalité, tous étrangers quand on sent qu'on n'est pas aimé. Tous métis, tous bâtards, on a tous dans les gènes un peu de parfum de hasard, citoyen d'ailleurs, ni couleur ni nationalité, tous étrangers quand on sent qu'on n'est pas aimé.
Welcome back, Brunch and Budget, Bonfire Radio. That was France's own Rap Sense. There's the little accent on the E, so I'm not sure if that's trying to be a pun, Rap Sensei, or if the word sense in French is just sense with an accent.
Okay.
This is my lack of French.
I'm like, I don't know.
French people, tell me what's going on with that. Bon car, what's good? Let me know. Anyway, we're back. Those were rappers rapping about some Dr. King Boulevard, even if they're not in our country. And we're here with Dedrick Asante-Muhammad talking about the racial wealth divide. By the way, the reason that divide, some rapper word stuff, sounds better than gap, or it sounds more descriptive, is gap is the small 3-letter word. Divide is not only large, but it's symmetrical.
Yes, so it feels like there's a divide.
You can see
when
it,
you
I'm
say
saying,
it.
yeah.
You can visualize the divide. So we talked, you gave us a ton of good information, and I feel like there's people who are listening to this who are like, yes, I'm so with you. I'm so there. I totally am on it. I'm going to tell everybody about this.
Tell everyone.
Yes, so I feel like they might run into some friends who they talk to about this, or family members who will be like, what are you talking about? That's bullshit. I came up here with nothing, or I know someone who came up here with nothing, and look at them now. The racial wealth divide is a myth. You're just making things up, blah, blah, blah. So if you encounter people like that, you're listening to this and you're passionate about it, how do you respond to people who are in denial about this?
Yeah. Well, it's, one, are they open to facts and have an understanding that one person being successful doesn't mean that there's equal opportunity for everyone? I mean, there was black millionaires in the 20s, right? That doesn't mean that all blacks had equal opportunity. It means that there were a few blacks who were able to get through difficult circumstances. But if they're open, and if they're not open to it, then leave them alone and move on to talk to some, and you should be talking to people who are more rational. But if they are open to actually some information, I will highlight, we have the Racial Wealth Divide a website, cfed.org/RWD. There's a resources section. We highlight the reports. We did the Ever-Growing Gap report, which gives information about, what is the median wealth today, what is the average wealth today, what was it in 1983, what is it for different groups, and what's it projected to go to 2043. And, it's not just some personal bias. These are the numbers. This is what is happening. I think, one thing I highlight a lot is the Racial Wealth Divide Facebook page called Bridging the Racial Wealth Divide. And that's a space where, because it can be hard to find this information. Every day we post reports, not just from CFED, but from Urban League, from Policy Link, from Center for Global Policy Solutions, all the people who are doing good work in this space, and highlight the different reports that focus on Native Americans and racial economic inequality, Asian Americans, racial economic inequality, Central Americans, and economic empowerment. And so you can get a wide variety of data on this. And then, too, you have the Brunch and Budget podcast, and people should be listening to that. We have a Race and Wealth podcast where we talk to a lot of the leading experts on different aspects of racial economic inequality and community activists about best practices on how to deal with those issues. And you can just, if you go to SoundCloud or iTunes, you can just put in Race and Wealth, and our podcast will come up. Because we're trying to, create spaces where people know they can go and get a wide variety of information. Not just stuff I write, right? But stuff that is out there that a lot of different people are writing. Because it's becoming understood. And I think there's one positive thing that's happened over the last 4 years, maybe a little bit longer. People are understanding that economic inequality is a real thing.
Yes,
and that there is
it.
a less space for this idea that that we're all equal, we all have equal opportunity. People still get sensitive about the racial aspect. That's just because people don't want to talk about race. But the larger issue of growing economic inequality, people are starting to understand it. All of those places will be giving you resources.
Well, and talking about money in general, we don't we can't possibly talk about this enough, that we don't talk enough about money. We don't share. We don't let people know. A lot of it has to do with pride and shame and propaganda.
And
we've been told not to do it.
And the propaganda is that the system works. Everybody's doing okay, and if you're not, you messed up.
Yes.
So that's why the shame kicks in. No one wants to talk about you're struggling, right? And poor people, some don't want to talk about it, but particularly middle income. When I was at the NAACP and we were still kind of ending the foreclosure crisis, I would repeatedly get leading pastors, congregations of 1,000 people, leading some leading civil rights leaders who would come to me and say, actually, I'm about to go through foreclosure. Can you help? And I was like, well, actually, we have resources to help. But like, okay, the foreclosure proceedings happen in 3 days. I was like, oh, we can't help. You can't. That's too late.
That's it. It's over.
It was just starting.
Right.
We could have helped. But because of the pride stuff and that they are, articulate people, leaders in the community, they didn't feel that they could share, I'm going through economic problems. But just because you're very talented, successful in many ways, doesn't mean you don't run into economic problems. You don't need help. We got to get past that pride stuff and act like everything's okay all the time. We're all struggling.
And another thing you said earlier that I want to bring back that is really awesome is when we were talking about stability, sometimes we're talking about getting to check. And people are so ashamed
living on credit cards,
of living check to check, living on, and barely be out. But that having a check that's going to come and it's going to take care of all the money you needed to spend, that's an accomplishment.
And two, I was thinking too much about poor people trying to get to that point. But there's a lot of high-income people who would be in a much better place if they could just get check to check because they're using credit cards.
Right.
Way too much. They got too much personal debt. So look at where you are and then set that big goal of, not spending more than you have or, developing the savings or developing investments. You got to figure out honest assessment of where you are. And I just think, I'm making good money, so I should have this amount of money in stocks.
Yeah.
First, get rid of your credit card bill.
Yeah.
Right.
Cover
Before
that
you get in
first
stocks,
before you start investing. Well, and I love what you said about, people feeling the shame and the cycle and like sharing that with the pastor, what pastors were going through, because I feel like if we all just started talking about it, maybe you read the stats, but before you do that, you come to your friend or your family member and you say, hey, this is where I'm at with my money, actually.
Yeah.
I'm with him because I'm living it right now.
That was one of the most positive things with my mother's. We were pretty middle class before they had a divorce. My parents had a divorce, but then, we were poor. We qualified for welfare, what have you. My mom being a white woman in a middle class area, she felt she didn't need to use the government welfare system, but we had friends who would give us a couple $100s for food that day. We'd get old cars and stuff like that. But she was just very transparent about money and about, look, we just can't afford this. Instead of Dedrick, mommy, why can't I have this? And not saying why. We just don't have enough money for it. And I think that helped me have a better understanding of economics, much more so than my friends who just got stuff. But didn't understand that actually costs money. So, we need to be more real. And again, that's why I love that article that I was talking about with Asia, about this woman named Asia who talked about, she's put her kids to bed hungry and how to struggle with that. Because on TV, you see all this weird stuff where, people are waiters or what have you, but they live in a very nice apartment.
Right.
They have enough money to go and hang out. And it's just but that's not real. That's not people living much more like Roseanne. Again, I'm old, so it's an old school reference. I don't know a contemporary one.
Rest in peace to Carrie Fisher, one of the head writers of Roseanne.
Yes,
If you were a fan of her for her acting, that's really what she did, was writing.
But again, just, we always, even Blackish, our Modern Family. This is the black family, this is the modern family. You'd have to be millionaires to live the way they live, but they never talk about that.
Yeah, they never talk about the money part of it and what it takes.
And how unusual they would be. That in reality, Why Not Our Family sitcom's more about median household income, $50,000-$60,000.
And what does that
household?
Like?
Even for black think about the Family Matters house, and didn't only one of them have a job? It was just right?
And he was a police officer?
He must have been the king of cops.
No, that's right. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, there's a reason why we're not realistic, because we don't project in our society but we have to get beyond that. Like you said, have honest discussions among our friends and if your friends invite you out, you should be able to say, I can't afford it now. You know, that's cool. I'll go next time. Or maybe you can figure to do something that doesn't cost money. You got to be more real with each other.
And for those of y'all who have kids right now, be this real. It's important for you to be this real. Maybe your child can become the director of the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative. I mean,
building an army of y'all.
I'm just highlighting this because it clearly had an effect on you.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
And not just in terms of your job, because I'm sure you could have worked in a number of areas, but this still would have been an important thing to you.
Mm-hmm. No,
and I think that's what the point is, to make sure this remains for the next few hundred years till we can get over it.
Be real and transparent about where you are. If you feel like you could do nothing else, do that with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for being here, Dedrick.
No, and thank you for Brunch and Budget, helping to have people get more real about their finances and what it means in this type of economy. So it's important that it's out there.
Any more shout outs or links that we've missed?
Shout out to Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King.
Right.
Always.
And his son.
And his son.
Yeah.
and check out Freedom Budget 1967.
Yes.
Google that. Check out our Facebook page again, Bridging the Racial Wealth Divide on Facebook, and check out the Race and Wealth podcast.
Awesome.
All right. We're going to leave you off with the last song. Man, there's a lot of really good songs about Dr. King. And this is a young cat from Monroe, Louisiana. His name is Top Billion. And his song simply called Martin Luther King. It's to him, about him, to you, and about you. And we want to thank you. And check us out on iTunes. Feel free to leave comments. Get on Spreaker. Get on all the stuff we're on. Tell us we're wrong, and we can have a fun argument. Go listen to TK in the AM and all the other Bonfire shows. Don't tell them that they wrong, though, because they got a little venom in their words. And we'll check you next week. Bunch of Budget, Bonfire Radio. It's a new good year so far. Peace.
At this time, I have the honor to present to you the moral leader of our nation. I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination.
Amen. Rest in peace to the king. It's a shame that he didn't live to see his dream. Dedicated his life to the fight for civil rights for human beings and was killed for that thing. What I wouldn't give to be there on the scene, marching in Selma with the SCLC. Had the sit-ins and boycotts, I would have been non-stop, man. I would have took a bullet for the team. And Martin, his legacy will never be tarnished in my eyes. He's the greatest American this country harnessed. To us black folk, he's one of our many martyrs. He should have been the first of us in the Oval Office. Not just him, but all of our forefathers wanted a brighter future for their sons and daughters. And I'm one of them, so I won't pretend that I forget what it meant when he said that I have a dream, that one day this country will live to its creed and be the lands of the free. I have a dream we be treated equally. This song is in memory of Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day this country will live to its creed and be the lands of the free. I have a dream we be treated equally. This song is in memory of Martin Luther King. Nowadays, a million streets are named MLK, and one Monday in the year is holiday. In February, he gets a lot of praise, and he's become an icon to all of us today. But I think we use his legacy in vain, remembering just his name and not the things that he say. Like an MLK Day, how many of us remember his worth? We just party hard on Sunday, then not go to work. On MLK Boulevard, brothers get murked. If named after him, it's the city slum for sure. And it's messed up when it's Black History Month. Rosa Parks and MLK is all we're taught since young, man. In a sense, we played him for a chump. From the jump, we took his message and twisted it up for our own agenda. I wish it happened never, but the words that he said will ring true forever. I have a dream that one day this country will live to its creed and be the lands of the free. I have a dream we be treated equally. This song is in memory of Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day this country will live to its creed and be the lands of the free. I have a dream we be treated equally. This song is in memory of Martin Luther King. We had a black man in the White House. Does it really mean the dream came to life now? And Oprah, one of the richest people that's now living. But too many black women live in poor conditions. Brothers in the systems, less in college, more in prison. Cause of positions where it is hustle or you be finished. Is there really a difference between now and then? I feel like there was a reward for what they marched for. Cause we're still in a war outside. Harassed cause of my pants or my shirt size. I remember a time before I got my dreads, I afraid to be profiled by the cops when they ride. Man, this life ain't right when it comes to the light. It's a fact, if you're black, it's harder than if you're white. It's a terrible plight that so many live. It's worse, no one gives a damn about these ghetto kids. Don't wanna see us live, they wanna see us die. Cancer, diabetes, AIDS, all of them are high. If there's a God in the sky, you gotta ask him why. But then you'll lower your eyes cause you'll get no reply. Man, what's there more to tell? We're in hell. Why Martin stepped on the balcony of the motel? He couldn't save us, we gotta save ourselves. So one day I hope this dream will realize itself. I have a dream that one day this country will live to its creed and be the lands of the free. I have a dream we be treated equally. This song is in memory of Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day this country will live to its creed and be the lands of the free. I have a dream we be treated equally. This song is in memory of Martin Luther King.
Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.